Hello, Mike. Happy Tuesday.
Jack, it is Tuesday. Wow. Yeah, I was going to say, should we acknowledge that this is not our normal thing, but we missed each other on Christmas, right? So we had a
Yeah.
nice week off, and now why not do it before the new year? Because hey, I just uploaded our last episode, so there you go. I'll try to keep my pace going. But yeah, I do have some topics for this week, unless anything new in the world of AI hits you.
Well, I think Christmas was maybe a little bit slow, but there's some interesting mergers and acquisitions. So Nvidia acquired the company, and I'm hearing that Meta also acquired a company. So it seems that there is definitely a lot of interest in making the computation more sophisticated. That was the Nvidia kind of like acquisition, kind of like closer to the silicon algorithm, like optimizing the GPUs and how they process memory, and then maybe a little bit of an agentic style of acquisition by Meta, where they kind of are focusing on the kind of AI architectures, not the silicon so much, but the AI style of agentic processing.
Well, and we forgot to say that Elon finally funded us, and you are actually in space right now, right? From your background, you are up in the space station mirror or something because of our new found wealth.
Yeah. This is the Christmas style of the universe. I'm just floating in the universe during Christmas, and when Christmas is over, the colors of the stars will change. So,
That's
so
true.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Oh well. Yeah. I guess actually one negative of being in the space station is the views probably are not that good. It's a pretty small window, right? It's like being in a submarine. Like you can't, the pressure equalization gets a little dangerous, I think. So you don't get the Star Trek Enterprise views,
Mm.
right? You wish, but you just don't get them. It's a shame, really.
Well, I have a Blu-ray of the 2001 Space Odyssey, and that space station, the view is I mean the special effects, all kind of made, in kind of like a real props, are fantastic, right? But if your space station is spinning, right, the views from outside are not really kind of like something to look
No.
for.
And literally probably dangerous to have them at all, if you know what
Yeah.
I mean. You don't need to do a lot of it's not like the what is it in the Millennium Falcon where it's sort of the dad's pickup truck look, like you've got this big dashboard, the big window, so you can kind of like steer, I guess, which is a thing that you're supposed to do in space. But anyway,
Yeah,
yeah, it's
with your window outside with the elbow outside the window.
that's right. How many Grand Prix convertible Pontiacs were bought because it's like, yeah, I'm in my Millennium Falcon. Yeah,
Exactly.
so.
Yeah.
Uh, Bad metaphor is what I'm getting at. Like, yeah, no, space is dangerous. Stay away. Looking at it doesn't help you. You just need some calculus. That's all. And honestly, yeah. Although I suppose in what is it, Apollo 13, they had to do some reconnoitering famously through the window. Like they had to somehow do a burn. It's a dramatic thing, but if I looked it up, I can't imagine that looking out the window worked, but I guess it did in this case. They were able to do, anyways, it was very dramatic. Do you remember this scene where he's trying to
Yeah.
like, point toward Earth and they're like,
Yeah.
okay, just keep your eye out the window. I mean, maybe I'm pretty cool though when you think of it. Yeah, I guess the windows are for some
Yeah.
reason. Hmm.
Well, the human component there, is sometimes unappreciated. I mean, recently there was some talk about, the publicly known secret that, some space shuttle missions, during those people, on the crew had like mental breakdowns and wanted to kind of get out and open the hatch. So
Oh,
then they,
okay.
so you can
I
imagine,
didn't know that. Yeah.
yeah, so then they started putting locks, on hatches, these kind of obvious things. But you can imagine, like, maybe the first moon mission, and then obviously Apollo 13, the kind of malfunction, that they had, how much pressure there was on those guys, and and how what stellar performance they had, because during the first mission they had actually no idea, how to land this thing, so Neil Armstrong was actually kind of, like balancing on the edge of death, that like the whole time, and they kept their cool, and then Apollo 13, during the malfunction that they had, they really had to improvise a lot of stuff, and it was probably not very obvious that they are coming home, and the way they did everything was kind of like optimal, right? So going to space really is not for everybody, I guess.
That's a really good point. And I mean, dramatized, I remember even as a kid, they had a movie called Marooned, right? Almost right after that, they made it seem so tailor built for our
Yeah.
entertainment world, right? Like because yeah, I always keep wondering in all this space stuff, of course, is like, you guys realize that we've been doing this on Earth since forever, right? Like that's the whole point of these Shackletons and crazy people that go and like break through ice to try to get to some point, in a frozen tundra. I'm like, that's what exploration's all about, right? It's really difficult. It's hard to imagine survival at all, but of course, humans are pretty resilient to amazing. I think it's the panic seems an interesting topic, right? Because that's what most of our talk about AI is to kind of calm down a little bit. And maybe that is a good segue because I do have a graph for, I have
Mhm.
a Jack graph here. Uh,
All right.
yeah, except I guess snow is falling off our house, which is weird. Okay, so let me do a graph because I think it's pretty good. So we do talk a lot, and I think both you and I agree is don't panic. Right? I honestly still, we could do agentic maybe next week because I think when there's some agency behind AIs, it becomes interesting, right? Like they are in a sense really geared toward this prompt architecture, right? Like you're supposed to say, hey, we're in space and we don't have any, whatever, like here's the context. And then it's great. Like it'll just say, all right, take the space multiplier and put the duct tape, whatever. Like it's really good at this sort of fill in the blanks stuff, but it doesn't come to you yet with any agendas, right? Like it's not there like bossing you around yet, which maybe it never will, right? We can say like it certainly could, but people being people, we're weird. And I just had this, by the way, I was trying to get through to some place and it had a very nice AI voice and it spoke to me by name, which was interesting. I thought that was kind of fun, right? Like it's like, hey, Michael, why don't you do this? Like give me this, that, and the other. It was still very computery, right? It didn't have an agenda, it had a script. But then when I reached the human, finally, we love humans, right? We're pro-humans, pro-human.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
So far
Anyway,
so good. Yeah.
so far so good. But when I reached the human could articulate things but couldn't do anything. So it was really interesting. Like they could tell me the things I needed to do, but I was like, no, I really need you to do these things. And it's like, well, I can't because the computer told me I can't do them. So I don't know. There's a sci-fi book in there somewhere, right, Jack? Like if we don't have any agency as humans, right? That's where I figure that's where it gets really interesting because otherwise it's just a bunch of info and it's really good info. It's pretty good, right? In terms of what it produces.
Yeah, I mean, there might be something, even more kind of nefarious about all this agency, right? I mean, if you can imagine, and there was some talk about the politicians using AI now to draft legislation.
Mhm.
So what if
But I'm
you?
just saying that's still not it saying I want to draft some I want it to want to draft some see what I mean? The solution to your problem is that's where I'm trying to have it like, can it be truly, can it act? That's what I mean. Because then when it comes to us, and maybe you missed this week's article, but same thing. I just keep writing pretty much like how we do need this, right? We are very, I don't think we're very outcome oriented, let's just say, right? We're good at, shuffling things around, but when it comes to actually saying, hey, here's the thing that we want to do, let's do it, it becomes difficult because you need a lot of buy-in. So one of my readers wrote and said, yeah, all we need is to have all the money go away and be put into a thing where there's, you know what I mean? Like one of the slightly crazy people, it's like the solution to everything is just economic, uh, what's that word?
Yeah,
Magic,
positive feedback, right? Uh,
something. But as
yeah,
I
yeah.
wrote back and I'm like, yeah, getting everyone to cooperate would be great, right? Like, let's go there, but how do you can't do that. It doesn't seem to work, that someone will reject it. In any case, that's why I think it's interesting if the AI woke you up and said, Jack, get to work, man. Your thing is due in 10 minutes. Here I can do most of it, but by the way, you got to do those. In fact, I didn't do my curls this morning. You see what I mean? Like I'm already behind, Jack.
Mm.
Where's
Well,
my
yes.
agent?
Well, I mean, in a way, this kind of idea it was around in the AI circles for decades now,
Mhm.
especially in the 70s and 80s. They were kind of like thinking, oh, the real AI like we have today, which I believe, people in the field in 70s and 80s, they thought that that's just around the corner, right? This kind of level that we have here. So they were talking all the time about the agentic long range planning, long time reasoning, like continuous, the artificial life crowd. It was very pronounced. There was conferences on that artificial life, very serious ones, and how to orchestrate that kind of stuff. So how do we kind of get them to think? How do we kind of get them to kind of maybe react to those not non-obvious triggers, like if you didn't do your morning kind of routine, it's kind of like a maybe an obvious trigger. Oh, we are missing bench press or something, right? But that there is also kind of like internal agendas, like something like it's like a non-obvious trigger, right? Like it is kind of uh, existing somewhere maybe deep in the neural network of the system, but it's really not an obvious thing because it's kind of like a vector that has to point in a certain way, and then the AI will tell you, oh, you need to exercise more, right? Without actually observing you that you didn't, right? So that kind of research was quite a bit. Um, quite interesting, I would say. I mean, so especially the multi-agent people were kind of, that research field was kind of like cooperative agency or adversarial agency. All that was kind of centering around the concepts that you are talking about. Like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, so we have that AI. It's sitting there. It can think, but let's kind of make something out of it, right? Like let's not just kind of like press enter every 10 minutes, but let's press enter and come back next week and see what comes out, right? So,
I mean, I think we're on opposite sides of many things, but just in this is my fascination with Apple because, as you know, Apple does bug you all the time. Like it does have, at least if you have one. Well, no, see, I forgot to
mm,
put on my watch. There you go.
mm,
But when you do submit to these very long trails of data capture, which Apple's kind of famous for, right? Like just have a thing now on my phone that whenever I drive, I guess that Allstate knows how much I've driven. Or you see what I mean? Like once you get access to
mm,
fairly robust and I would hope accurate data, you do have this rough problem, which is what do you do with it, right? In this case, they're trying to do risk models, and I think Apple famously has kind of not shown up because once they applied all this data to any sort of agent like Siri or whatever they call these things now, right? Or just because it can know all these things, it has even a harder time not being creepy. That's my thing. It's like I think people were just like, I don't like it. You know, it's like meeting somebody. I don't know. You're probably not a social media guy. Sorry, Jack. But you know, it's like when you meet somebody and they tell you all about the things that you've been doing because they've seen it all on your Instagram feed, right? Like they know everything, and I'm like, well, that kind of takes the fun out of it, right? Like, you know, what am I supposed to talk about? Because you already know, because I just told you. You know, that's the thing is that you don't see it. You see it as being passive because you're just like, hey, you know, I got 5 likes. You know, I'm like, you know, obviously my dog calendar that I got for Christmas isn't a big hit with my crowd, but and everyone will mention it. That's what's going to happen. That's what's so odd, and I just think computerizing that just seems fun, funny, perhaps. I don't know. I guess where I'm leading this is that I am working, and because we're heading into a new year, I think this is a good time. We're in year 2.5 or something like that of coming out of COVID, which was a big change, a big sea change in what we considered work to begin with, right? And then suddenly comes up this very, very random technology that takes the world by storm because it is pretty incredible, grows very quickly to super mature models. I'm pretty sure, right? Like the models pretty much now are not that controversial. They're pretty good. So I don't think there's a big runway, but then in the future or in the distance, there's this AGI idea, which we both probably think is a little odd. I don't know. It doesn't seem to have any particular purpose. This
Well, it's
goal.
hard to define, right?
Yeah,
Like
it's
what is
yeah,
it, what it is.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's maybe a little bit easier to kind of define like a super intelligence, the kind of thing, like Star Trek, and then you have, the Klingons that might be a little bit below, right? But then maybe you will have some other races like those that kind of like are more deliberate and less kind of trigger happy, and you would say, oh, they might be more intelligent, but it's still difficult to define, what that thing really is, right?
Well, and super intelligence, first of all, would say, hey, you need to raise taxes more. And then there's suddenly you're pulling the plug right there. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, what's it gonna say, right? Like, what would you do? You know, I think people have certainly mental models about curing all sorts of disease, but okay. You know, I didn't know that was really our, I think we've cured a lot of disease, right? I think actually I
Yeah.
have a lot of thoughts about how we should go back to being a little bit better about how we treat ourselves before we start worrying about being cured. You know what I mean? Like we have
Yeah.
things in our ability right now that we just don't do, and we look for cures instead of but my dad was a behavioral psychologist, so I have this kind of built in like physician heal thyself. Anyway, um well, but here's my idea, and I hope I can present this in an interesting way. I don't think you've seen this, so would love your feedback. Ready for the future? Here's what I think AI can do, and I'm building it into a class. I'm going to teach the class in spring, and my hope is um, to actually kind of operationalize this class a little bit with some real hard problems. Because one thing that Northwestern has done is to create a whole, you know how they get funded for something? Somebody gives them a lot of money to do something. Okay, so there's this new part of Northwestern, a new discipline called uh, dealing with people that you don't like. I don't know, whatever. Like it's supposed to be like creative yelling at each other, but not being mad, or it's something to do with that. Like it's very politically charged, right? That we can't be right or left and et cetera, et cetera. But we're going to have a whole place that is going to be about um, being mad about this kind of thing. So good for them, right? Like, you know what I mean?
Maybe Hyde Park style of a place.
Yeah,
You
honestly,
know,
I just want to bring this to them because I'm like, how would you ever get people to agree on things that you, how do you make people change their minds, right? That's our biggest thing. We're both Bayesian fans, right? Like, how do you get things to change in a positive or negative way or at all, right? Like, how do you do it? So here's my model. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Graphs, ahoy. I'm going to see if I can do this without getting, it's bypassing. Yeah, okay, sure, whatever. Course model. Okay, so pretty wordy. Bear with me. Can you see this? Can you read this at all?
Yeah, very good.
Okay, so anyway, I'm just trying to say in the past, as far as I know, whenever you're going to make a decision, you can do it this way. So for example, I'm kind of doing an example of quantitative gathering like a star rating. Okay, whatever. So that is data. And then if you want to do something with it, you need a data analyst. So these are humans, right? And they do some sort of normalization or whatever, and they have some sort of chart maybe saying, hey, here, most people like this or whatever. And then there's somebody here who takes that information and they decide something. So far, so good. Now, the real issue with this that I think is really bad is you tend not to learn anything. Right? Like you just kind of take this data and you do something, and then you forget, in a sense, why you did it and what you were looking at in order to make this decision, right? So you're not really correlating this to this. And sometimes by the time you make the decision, this has changed. And anyway, right? So things are weird, but very common.
Yes. So
Okay.
in the data analytics community, I think they kind of had this same feeling about all this, and so I think there was like a switch, maybe around the era of data mining. That data mining is exactly like how do we learn from all these sophisticated models that we build, right? So now they stop saying, oh, this data mining, it's switched into prescriptive analytics, right? So
Okay.
a little bit
There's
more
nothing like
optimistic.
changing the name, like prompt engineers. Did they go away
Yeah,
by now? I don't know. Anyway.
yeah. So a little bit more optimistic view, but I think you might be right about the left-hand side of the graph. Yeah.
Okay. Well, so either way, I've been here before because somebody said we did that and it didn't work. That's my favorite line in any company, right? Like, but why didn't it work? Anyway, so here we've got this thing. I'm very interested because I'm a designer into qualitative stuff, right? So qualitative could be like a survey or God knows what, right? Like it's usually words. It's usually like, anyway, qualitative data. It's wild. So it's still data and you can still normalize it. And that's kind of like a lot of keywording stuff. Remember that was fun in a while. Like people could try to discern temperament, love and hate by the kind of words people use. So you could kind of normalize it, but there does take someone very skilled, someone just like here, to assess it and give it some context, right? You still can't just take a bunch of ideas and give the Cliff Notes version of it without a fair amount of work. And what you tend to build is some sort of narrative, right? Like people don't like our product because it breaks all the time. I guess there's a narrative, right? And they'd be like, great, so let's decide to make it not break so much, etc. But the great thing about narratives, right, is they're pretty easy to share, where data visualization really kind of isn't, because in a sense it should change a lot, right? But stories tend to actually stay a little bit more static, because then we'd say, hey, we tried to make our stuff not break so much. Hey, it's been 3 months. Do people still think it breaks? Whatever. Like you need this loop, right? Like, did what we do actually change the thing that we have this narrative around?
Yeah.
And again, this might not be your thing, but I think qualitative data is pretty useful, right? It's more narrative based than it is visual, which I like because I think they're both lying. They're not, neither is truthful, but numbers tend to intimidate people more. So they think they're more truthful.
Yeah, so there is a new company. I'm just blanking on their name, but essentially it allows you to kind of read through some sort of a passage text, maybe like a Medium publication, and on the side, as you kind of scroll through your text reading, they will generate like an animated infographics about what is actually in text.
Oh,
So that kind of conceptually, you mentioned that the qualitative stuff is kind of more kind of textual. but I think we are trying to kind of make it visual, right? And I think that what that company is doing is kind of has a lot of potential, right? Like you are reading, but also on the side, the AI is creating like a high bandwidth representation that might be actually pulling information from other sources about what you are reading. I think conceptually that's like exactly the middle column that you are describing. But yeah.
Well, and as I said, this is just a general like, hey, here's how it is, and this is the way it is. But the point being, now we have this brand new thing, which is what I'm trying to uh figure out, which is that you can put them both together, right? Like we don't really care in some ways that qualitative and quantitative data are mixed because now we've got RAG, right? So what we can do is, in a sense, we can keep dumping stuff into our, it's not really data, right? It's kind of this weird blobby stuff, and it's really powerful, I find, right? Because then you can say you can take something like numeric stuff and qualitative stuff, and you can start to build with prompts. And this is where the human comes in. This is where the students come in, is they need to try to piece through how to make this create a narrative. Right. So this is the thing. So from a human's point of view, you want to create this narrative again, but now the narrative is going to affect the decision, and it's going, I think it's going to be entirely qualitative, because narratives are just easier to communicate, right? Like, and they can change. And I think actually when a narrative changes, it's far more powerful than when a uh, dial goes up, or you know what I mean? Like that's the fallacy of the graph that always goes up, that thing, right? Like, hey, what's last week's or last month's profit? Well, this month it's more. See what I mean? And then everybody's like, okay, phew, thank God we don't have to do anything because obviously the next month will be even more. We're on the right track. All those sort of narratives around the way it's visualized, whereas narratives could be that, well, it could be very complicated and interesting, or it could be simple. And my feeling that fun would be is if you watch the narrative change day by day. So instead of on your dashboard, you see a story, and when the story changes, that becomes actually a really fun human thing that I think we're particularly adept at. You probably have experienced this by watching any narrative show where you're like, well, why did they do that? Right? Like, hey, in this earlier scene, they said that they hated that, and now they're doing it. You see like, we're really pretty good at narrative um, veracity, if that makes sense. And we've got this magical tool now that makes building those things possible. So this is the thing, Jack. What do you think? Does this make any sense?
Yeah, totally. I would probably suggest maybe a little bit of a kind of maybe additional information about drag, because because on the at the bottom of your image, you have a box with data, then you have a box with data, and then you have a box with RAG. Right. So what this RAG thing really is a search mechanism if your data box is very large. Right. So it's a relevance algorithm that gives you access to something that is similar to what you might want. Right. So in a way, the outcome from RAG is still a data box. Right. It's just that now you established some sort of a relevance. Right. So that's one way of doing things with qualitative analysis. Right. Another thing that can be done is that, well, as the AI becomes bigger and bigger, the input windows become larger and larger. So chances are that RAG is not necessary. You just dump the data set into the input window, and then chances are that you will have good results, certainly different from the results that you got from RAG, because when you do RAG, you're subdividing whatever data you have into chunks, maybe very big chunks, but still chunks, right? And then you represent them very efficiently as vectors with some kind of realization of what is the adjacent information in there, but still fundamentally it's chunking. So you are making a decision. Hey, is there subdivisions that I will be more interested in, or maybe I want to dump the whole thing into the AI, having a thought that, well, the relevance really here is not what I'm looking for, because the whole document, the whole data set is within itself, even though there might be semantic irrelevance in it, I still want to benefit from the whole document rather than from individual chunks. So I think that both have a little bit. So that RAG approach has maybe requires a little bit of a qualification, right? Like you are selective, right? But you don't have to be, right? Because you still can be in the vector space, dumping everything that you've got on a big model, right? And get a different result, right? Because of that nature of search, which is by the definition vector similarity. By definition, vector similarity is semantic similarity, and then maybe you don't want that. Maybe you want to preserve the long range discovery capability that you would get if you don't do RAG. You just dump everything that you've got on the model into the input window, which now is growing to hundreds and hundreds of pages of text, which might be enough, right? So kind of a little bit of a qualification there.
No, I think I actually a really, really good point. And let me just tell you my mental model and why I'm doing this is that I always think we start off at any point in time with a time boxed thing. Like if I go out today and I ask people, hey, how are you going to vote in the next election, right? And what are the things that concern you the most, or whatever I say and gather, right? That it in itself is a very time consuming process, and you're going to bring that in, and then you're going to analyze it, and you're going to come up with a word cloud or something. You see what I mean? Like, what are you going to do other than try to build a narrative that's going to have someone decide that, hey, you really should have a position about problem X? I'm just saying this is just a example, right? But in any situation, I think it's the same, right? We've got very qualitative ways to measure things, but we also have qualitative things such as, we just went through grades or something, right? You know what I mean? Like there's, they're easy ways, but those ways are terrific to analyze because you've already done all the work beforehand of making them easy to analyze, right? Like, so you have a fully, type data set where, you can count stuff. You know what I mean? The whole world that we've built since forever is about making things easy to get stuff out of in the end. Fair enough, right? But that doesn't work for qualitative stuff. So you can't just throw in a novel, like you just said, and then expect that your outcome is going to be even, it will just ignore it, right? Because you just say, hey, count how many things are in this field or whatever. That's why I'm saying the brittleness of numbers is very attractive, because you know what's going to happen, right? You're not going to get too many infinities, as I like to call them, right? Like things don't go crazy too much. Whereas with qualitative stuff, things are kind of inherently crazy, and it's hard to make any sense of them until now. So why I'm saying LLMs or RAG, pardon me, the reason I'm saying RAG is what I want people to do is to work on the prompt. What do you want to know? That to me is what's most interesting, right? Because it'll come up with something, as we all know. AI is pretty good. It'll come up with something. It'll probably be wrong, but who knows? That's the great part of it, right? Like you just say, hey, I want you to take these thousands or tens or whatever pieces of information, and here's what I want you to do with it. And then this is the output from it. And the reason why this is important for me is now we're sort of setting up a little bit of a chain, right? Like no one goes back in and looks at the data is what I'm getting at, right? People are just, once you've analyzed the data, you never want to see this crap again. And you don't want to go out and get more data that's going to mess up your nice data and say something different, right? So you've already built in inherent bias in the gathering process because you don't want to do the work again. So this is what I'm getting at is now with RAG, you dump it in, you figure out what question, you get the answer. And then what I'm saying is you just dump more stuff in it with the same lens and see if you get a different answer. And to me, because there's little effort involved, you won't get as, because the prompting thing is fun. You know what I mean? Data analysis is not fun. Making dashboards is no fun. I've been doing it forever, right? Like it really is literally no fun. I will let you know. Just coming up with the right chart sometimes is like mind-bogglingly hard, you know? Like literally, I think I worked a year just trying to figure out one chart because it's, you know, it's hard. You know, how do you look at something and give it the, by the way, you know how long people look at a graph? 1 second. Like that is the longest you will get out of anybody in your data analysis, which is why it's bad. You see what I mean? It doesn't make them think, gee, I wonder if this data is correct. You know what I mean? Like they don't think any further than that.
Mm.
They just, I'm going to give you 1 second. And when that thing goes up, I'm going to be yes. And when it goes down, I'm going to say, what? No. See what I mean? Like it literally, there's nothing to it. Why is it going up? Never has been asked. Sorry, I'm very anti whatever. But when you start to say, okay, no, now it's a narrative. Why did the narrative change? Well, that's a super fun thing that can actually be shared amongst almost every discipline, I think, because we do want to collaborate, right? We want to share a story together. And when
Well,
the
I
story
would be
changes, you know, it's very human. Sorry,
I would be a little I would be a little bit careful about your optimism around, writing and prompting. Uh, just look at the computer science community and the code that we've been building, for decades and decades. I mean, very few systems have good documentation or code comments or inline. People, and that would be an equivalent of prompting, like kind of like telling the story what the system is supposed to be doing. That was always a struggle, right? I mean, the majority
Oh
of the
no, and that's
programs.
why I'm saying why we've got the perfect tool now because we hate to do this. That's what I'm saying. All I meant is that the lens, let's say the prompt is the lens, right? Like go through every piece of code on GitHub and find the best one. And
Hmm.
guess what? It would do it, right? Even as poorly as a poor prompt as that would be, an LLM would do it. And it would have a reason why. It's pretty amazing when you think about it because humans, like you said, yeah, we're terrible at this.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
and people spend their entire lives doing it. So I not that it matters, but you reminded me of a fun comment someone made, and they're like, why isn't math like code? And he was saying how it's really great when you read code and it says, go fetch password. You know, like you just have to read the method and it tells you what it's going to do. But the minute you get into Dirac and Laplace, and you see what I mean, like all math is named after the people that kind of worked on this idea, but it isn't directly like you can't see it, right? You can't see, Dirac and pass a function to. It doesn't work the same. As wouldn't it be great if math was a little bit more descriptive as to what these things meant? And then the discussion was really fun because I was like, yeah, it is. It's really hard, except F equals ma, right? That's Newton. So or E equals mc squared is Einstein, but you kind of like can't you use Einstein very broadly and you use Newton broadly just so you understand kind of what world you're sitting in. And I think we're going to need new taxonomies around this, right? Like this is the fun thing of having a model called 5.0. Remember when the new devices came out and it's like, oh, it's the new SE 7-3. Like everyone had a hard time like what makes this new one different from the last one? You see, like
Yeah.
and because we don't know why, how many models does GPT have now? That are all kind of named the same, like 4.0 mini, and there's 4. You know what I mean? Like it's like their taxonomy sucks. So maybe that's our next topic. Like, what the heck? What's the taxonomy around these models since they are like little. Anyway, so sorry. Back to this. This is the fun. Wish me luck. But as decision making go, I think it is actually a plus, right? Because you don't need as many very skilled humans. Sorry, humans, but you get differently skilled humans, maybe, right?
Yeah, that sounds to be yeah, sounds to be a safe assumption that the skill sets are kind of different. Uh, to so it seems that writing code, right, is maybe kind of code versus natural language, right? That those are really two different areas. I mean, many of my friends from college who became programmers, they were not they were not very kind of outspoken people. They were not really kind of writers, in the kind of like Tom Clancy sense, right? But yeah, they dedicated their life to writing code, right? And that was I guess enjoyment, and so it was for me. But now things have changed, right? Now it seems that that skill set around prompting and talking to an LLM is a totally different ball game.
But I think there's still a necessary. Well, it's back. Do you see what I mean? Like you could write code, but the thing was that was all in service of short-term, long-term issues, whatever, and very usually fairly serious uh, constraints, which is great because that's called design, right? Like design
Yeah.
is like you don't get everything, and here's the problem. You know what I mean? And figure it out as best you can, and it's very satisfying because yeah, you're like, hey, I've got these straws, and I've got some tape, and I need to build um, uh, filter so that we don't all die up here in space or something, to go back to that, right? Like here's this thing where you don't get to choose. And the freedom, if we could call it that, of a prompt is kind of new, right? Because you are programming, kind of,
Mm.
but you're doing it in the way that, like you said, you're not used to because you're used to being Fermiizing. Remember, we did this a couple weeks ago, whatever. Like you're breaking things down into little pieces, but as we can criticize the engineering mindset is sometimes you break it down too much, right? Like you forget why you were here. So the concept of over engineering things is the problem because that's our natural, we go down the alley too deeply. So hopefully I'm trying to get at this prompt person can still be high up enough to say, wow, we just added a bunch of new data and some of that data is obviously suspect, right? Like something's
Mm.
not quite right. I might need to go in and check to see if some great, somebody just wrote in all caps a bunch of curse words 500 times, like
Mm.
whatever, right? Like there could be that, and that's been the history of the internet, right? Like why does any of this work? Because they've come up with pretty decent filters, because no matter what there is, someone has exploited it, you know right? There isn't any cooperation per se, and I think, writ large and weird things like Bitcoin, right? Like it's all about not ever cooperating.
Mm.
And it's interesting. Sorry, I don't know if that's too far afield, but I do think that the storytelling is ultimately how decisions are made. That's all. Like, you can't
Yeah.
appreciate the code and be like, well, you appreciate it to the sense you don't want to dump it all and start again. That's usually the real reason, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And there might be some interesting things around like neuromodulation, for example, of the environment around the story. Like, I mean, you probably could remember that episode of Friends where Rachel got hired in that maybe one of the agencies, maybe like a kind of fashion stuff, and she was not smoking cigarettes, right? And then there was that group of other women in the office that were smoking, and when they got out, they kind of like talked about everything, and kind of made all the decisions over a cigarette, right? So, probably the two of us probably would prefer a cigar, right? But the idea was that, hey, there might be like there's some sort of a neuromodulation around the kind of the exchange of an ideas or prompts, right? That is kind of like in a kind of certain community environment, maybe a little bit of a cigar would positively neuromodulate, the prompts, right? So it's something that maybe is going to be emerging more and more, kind of around this concept of, hey, maybe a community between you and your LLM, because your LLM might have some predilection towards something, right, that is of interest to you. And then, you will be kind of your prompts, even though they might be exactly the same, like a prompt to another system, but they will work better with your LLM because of that community sense that is created, exactly through some sort of a, I don't know, smoking community or whatever, right? So like in the episode of Friends that I'm
No,
quoting.
no,
So yeah,
you
you
brought
might
up,
be
I
right.
mean, honestly, my biggest inspiration for all this is gaming, right? Like most people,
Mm.
like we've all said, will spend forever really high level engagement, right? Like
Yeah, yeah,
very smart people spending a lot of smart time. However, the output isn't whatever. You know what I
yeah.
mean? It is what it is. But what if you could have that same enthusiasm, I guess,
Mm.
toward something that made other people's lives better or made your community better or whatever, you know what I mean? Like that's where it becomes hard because you remove all this lattice work, of feedback. Because I can go out and I can stand in the corner right now and I can be like, hey, free hugs, whatever, and it isn't likely to be something that I would keep doing. It's very cold out, right, Jack? I don't want to
Yeah.
go out there. But you see what I
Mm.
mean? Like there's a million reasons to not engage in something because you just don't get feedback very quickly. Probably one of the reasons my last article, maybe next week, if you want to check it out, it's pretty good. But it just has to do with how we measure productivity. That's kind of a big thing, right? That I always like to talk about because it's like, well, it isn't really measuring anything because it's not a standard by which um, it was a standard for throughput, and throughput isn't often like you just said with coding. It isn't like, gee, I coded out 250 lines today, unless you do remember the good old days, right? Like, yeah, it was always about how much code you could write.
Mm.
And hopefully we're in this new thing where it's like that's very suspect now, right? Like quantity, it was never quality, but it was obviously assessed sometimes as being. Did you know, by the way, the amount of time you're supposed to spend to get uh, a degree in college was never about learning anything. It was all about how to pay professors their pensions,
Mhm.
right? So it was a normalization around a very non-normalized thing. But somehow we still had to sit in class for 120 hours. And therefore, that's the amount of time that you would need. But that, of course, means nothing, right? And that's what's the problem is what if you could instead be more outcome based, which is what this is trying to do, right? Like, hey,
Yeah.
you're going to make a decision. Your decision is probably right or wrong based on the story that you are reading, and then you want to see how does the story change, hopefully for the better, for the worse, right? And that's where I think it's a really interesting collaboration because you're doing the thing. And we got 5 minutes. My favorite thing on earth, do you know? My favorite thing ever since I was a kid is being a magician. Because, as everyone knows, they're lying. Right? Like, there is no such thing. Magic does not exist. And yet, if they do it right, you don't appreciate that magic exists. You appreciate that somebody went through the effort to want to fool you and being successful. And I don't know why. It just seems to me like it's kind of what we want to do with each other. I want to use my talents to make somebody else, experience. You know what? I want somebody else to feel something. This is kind of magic in a way. but I have to get feedback because if have you ever tried to do any magic before? You know what I mean? It's like you stand in front of a mirror for like years. It's it's really challenging, you know. But then once you do it, it's like people are amazed. Do you know that David Blaine guy, whatever he is? Um,
Not really.
Yeah, you can look him up either way, but you know, one of his tricks, let's call it that, one of his tricks is he's sitting there, he's talking like you and me, instead of smoking a cigarette, he just goes and he kind of goes blup and a frog comes out of his mouth. And you're like, wow, what a great trick, except that it's not a trick. He's just practiced being able to ingest a frog for countless amounts of hours. Until he can adequately control, you know, blah, 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 blah. I just think it's fascinating because there isn't any magic sometimes, usually. It's just persistence and having that goal because you want to see people be like, wow, yeah, that's pretty good. So,
Well, it's a useful concept. I think it was Arthur C. Clarke that said that any technology sophisticated enough will be indistinguishable from magic, right? So yeah, it's a useful concept, and definitely kind of there is a lot of sophistication in some of those tricks that kind of involve you know a lot of dexterity like with the cards, you know, and a lot of kind of pattern analysis, right? Like you know like being able to always kind of win in a card game, or kind of find some sort of a pattern in the cards, you know, even though they were shuffled. So yeah, I have a lot of interest actually in some of those things, especially if it is kind of pattern based, you know, like in the cards, you know, magic. Yeah.
well, I just mean it in terms of the reward. The reward you get for ceaseless amounts of work is the delight that you can pull something off, right? That you're doing something kind of out extraordinary. And I'm just equating it to the same as gamers, right? Like except that their appreciation is gets very very narrow because somebody could say, "Oh yeah, you know, you scored higher that so and so in this game," and most people would just it doesn't relate to most people. Whereas Magic, part of its charm is that it's supposed to relate to most people, right? Like almost everybody is supposed to be able to get it. See what I
And
mean?
maybe charming is the right word. I mean, there was this episode in X-Files a long time ago where there was a magician that was able to rotate his head like 360 degrees, you know, and then you know, and then there was a very charming story around this. So yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Well, either way. So this marks end of 2025, Jack. Can't say anything other than looking forward to next week.
Yeah. Have a great next year. I think our 2025 was pretty good.
Pretty good.
We
Yeah. Are you
yeah,
kidding? You know,
yeah.
as long as I push the button here, we're gonna have our last episode released, and we'll put this one out. I don't know. We'll figure out something, but yeah, sooner or later we'll have Rag put all of our episodes in and decide whether or not we've actually said anything interesting. I think that would be fun because I don't know.
Mm.
We certainly have viewers, by the way. If anyone's made it to the end, which nobody probably has, hey, welcome. Thank you, and thanks for watching. But
Yeah,
I do
thank
it
you.
because it's fun. It's always fun. Always lots to explore. It's a crazy new world. Um, yeah, we'll have to see next year. Agentic. I don't know. That one's a rough one.
Yeah. I think that yeah, maybe we can also write some stuff on Medium and other outlets to kind of maybe clarify some of the ideas, because what we do here is kind of like impressionist kind of a conversation, right? Like we are
Improv.
really
Improv.
uh, yeah. But sometimes if you have to write about the AI, then you have to be a lot more specific and
Yes.
kind of
Yes. Yeah.
get into really kind of maybe a concept that is you know that wouldn't be fun to talk about, you know, in our format. So, but yeah,
We'll do
I
it.
think
We'll do it
we
next week. But I gotta drop. Jack, have a happy new year.
yeah, you too. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Cheers.